The bar of success has been raised by PJ Fleck for the Minnesota Golden Gophers football program, but with a tough schedule in 2023, can Minnesota still row their way to success this season?
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
And when we talk about rowing their way to success, it's been consistent success the last handful of seasons for Minnesota. PJ Fleck has established a clear barometer and a clear bar of where he expects Minnesota Golden Gopher football to be. And the fans now have an expectation of where they expect Minnesota Golden Gopher football to be, and that expectation has been winning, well, more games than you've been losing. Minnesota has established a certain level of consistency over the last few seasons. You look at back-to-back 9-4 seasons for the Golden Gophers, and there were some games in there. You know, what's crazy about that is you look at 8-4 regular seasons and bowl wins. There were some games in there. You go back a couple of years back to that game against Bowling Green in Minneapolis that everybody thought that they should have won. Everybody thought that maybe that should have been a gimme game, and maybe they should have went 9-3 with a bowl win, maybe a 10-win season back there in 2021. Of course, that was the season that Mohamed Ibriahim was injured after the Ohio State game. But although they've had consistency, there have been some things where they have fallen just a little bit short of Big Ten West titles, short of maybe a 9-win or maybe a 10-win regular season. They've had one of the better records since 2019 in the Big Ten Conference. They've had consistency, 2 straight wins against their arch rival Wisconsin, which includes 3 of 5. One of those 2 losses against the Badgers since 2018 was also in overtime. They've gone 7-3 over the last 10 against Nebraska. I know the Huskers have been down in that time period, but still, winning games that you should is very key to building a good football program. Now, Minnesota has lost 10 of the last 11 meetings against Iowa, and here's something for you. Since 1982, the Gophers are 11-30 against Iowa. You talk about consistent success. They've had consistency just on the short end against the Iowa Hawkeyes. There's an Iowa issue in Minneapolis, and although lately it seems like a PJ Fleck problem, you dive into it a little bit deeper. Minnesota as a whole has had a problem throughout the Hayden Fry era, throughout the Kirk Ferentz era. It's been very difficult for Minnesota to get wins over the Iowa Hawkeyes across the decades. It has been tough, and that is something that Minnesota needs to reverse if they want to go and want to make that next step as a program and maybe contend for the Big Ten West Championship in 2023. Now, when you talk about this season, when you talk about 2023, you start on the offensive side of the ball, they are replacing an all-timer at Minnesota. Gopher running back Mohamed Ibriahim, one of the very best players that has ever donned the maroon and gold. Like, you look at him, 3 1,000-yard seasons with the Gophers, rushed for 1,665 yards and 20 scores last season, led the Big Ten in both of those categories. He has established himself as the best running back in Gopher history, holds the record for career rushing yards at Minnesota, career rushing touchdowns, single-season rushing yards, single-season rushing touchdowns, career 100-yard games, and, of course, that 19-game streak where he rushed over 100 yards in each and every single one of those football games. That's the big part. When you look forward to 2023, how do you replace that? He was such an integral part. He was such a big part to Minnesota's offense last season, and really, even though he was actually an integral part when he was injured, you really saw what happened to this Gopher offense a few years back when Mohamed Ibriahim was hurt after that Ohio State game. So how do you replace that? How do you replace Mohamed Ibriahim? It's not going to be one guy. It's not going to be one guy. It's going to be a stable. It's going to be a group of guys in the backfield for Minnesota. The first guy I really look at is Sean Tyler, a transfer from Western Michigan. Had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in Kalamazoo. Rushed for over 2,000 yards and 16 touchdowns over the last 2 years. Second-team All-MAC a year ago. Led the MAC in all-purpose yards last season, and he was 9th in the nation. He's got some big playability. He's got that breakaway speed. Once you get him to that second level, he's got the ability to bust off a 30, 40, 50-yard run, maybe even take it to the house. Sean Tyler, definitely someone to watch out for. But You got to think Zach Evans is going to share a majority of those carries. Zach Evans redshirted last season. He looked really good in the spring game. Busted off a big, I think it was a 70-plus yard run, multiple rushing touchdowns in the spring game for Zach Evans. He was the number 10 running back of the country coming out of high school, very, very highly regarded in that Minnesota class. He's going to be involved in the run game as well. How about true freshman Darius Taylor? He's another 4-star guy. He played as well, really good. He played really good in the spring game as well. So Darius Taylor is someone to keep an eye on. Bryce Williams, he's kind of the old guy in the group. He's kind of the veteran. 249 yards, 3 touchdowns last season. He was one of the many backs that kind of stepped in when Mohamed Ibriahim was out 2 years ago in 2021. That's another guy that's going to contribute as well. I see all 4 of these guys really contributing in a big-time way to try to establish the big chunk of production that Mohamed Ibriahim is leaving behind. Now, a huge reason why Mohamed Ibriahim was so successful at Minnesota is because of the Minnesota Moving Company up front, because of that offensive line. When you lose guys like John Michael Schmitz and Chuck Falanga up front, you got some work to do to try to replace those guys. Of course, JMS, first-team All-American, 3-time All-Big Ten, drafted 57th overall by the New York Giants. Chuck Falanga was a transfer from Michigan, so that kind of tells you what you need to know, how highly he was regarded as an offensive lineman. Third-team All-Big Ten last season, signed with the Packers as an undrafted free agent. It's been 2 years in a row Minnesota has had a dominant offensive line, big-time shoes to fill. How are they going to fill those shoes? Quinn Carroll was a part of this offensive line last year, a all-Big Ten honorable mention type of guy. Remember, he started his career at Notre Dame, another really good spot for offensive linemen. So Minnesota, getting guys from Michigan, getting guys from Notre Dame. These are places that have had really good luck, really good success at developing offensive linemen. They're coming in here to Minnesota. Of course, Quinn Carroll, originally from Edina, Minnesota as well. Ariante Ursley started every game at left tackle last season, all Big Ten honorable mention. So those are the 2 guys that you're going to look to build the offensive line around as well. Local kids are going to have to fill the gaps as well. Nathan Bowe from Lakeville, Minnesota, redshirt senior. Okay, he's seen his fair share of action. He's been around. He's waited his turn in this program. Tyler Cooper as well from St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin. This has been a really good O-line the last few years. It's contributed big time what they've been able to do with Mohamed Ibriahim and this run game. This offensive line is replacing a good amount this season. Can Quinn Carroll and Ariante Ursi step up to be at that level that a Chuck Falanga and a John Michael Schmitz were last year? That's a pretty high level, especially for John Michael Schmitz, one of the best offensive linemen to ever come out of the University of Minnesota, and that's saying something. So that offensive line is going to have to step up because they've got really big shoes to fill. Now, I believe this is going to be a more balanced Golden Gopher offense. There was the last 2 seasons, hell, you can maybe even go back further than that, even back to 2020, where this was very much a turn and hand type of offense that wanted to establish the physicality in the run game. But I believe this offense is going to be the closest to 2019 that we've seen in some time at Minnesota. It all starts at the quarterback position with the Greek rifle Athan Kaliakmanis. After Tanner Morgan was hurt, they wanted to ease Athan Kaliakmanis kind of into play. A lot, like I said, a lot of turn in hand. When you have a generational running back like Mohamed Ibriahim back there, yeah, that's probably what you're going to do. You want to ease the young quarterback into play. He threw the ball 22 times in his first start at Penn State and only had 1 more game with 20-plus pass attempts after that the rest of the season. And it turned out pretty well, right? It was that Wisconsin game. At Wisconsin, went 19 of 29, 319 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I would expect more development. I would expect a more balanced offense with a little bit more of an emphasis on the passing game, and I'll get to the reason why here in just a minute. Now, Kirk Shiraka, the offensive coordinator, he moves on to Rutgers. You got co-offensive coordinators, Matt Simon, who's kind of been in that role as well, Greg Harbaugh Jr. as well. These guys are both very familiar with PJ Fleck and what he wants to do with the football. But I would expect a little bit more in the passing game because you don't have a generational running back And you got some really good weapons on the outside. You got to start with Chris Autman-Bell. He was slated to have a big year last season, but injured earlier on in the season. He's back for year number 6. 11 catches, 214 yards, and a touchdown in 3 games last season. So he started off pretty well in that season. He might have been on his way to close to a 1,000-yard season. He was a leading receiver in 2021, 36 catches, 506 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He was a big part of that passing attack that looked pretty good in 2019 as well with Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman. He was involved a decent amount in that passing attack as well. So this is a guy that has logged a lot of snaps. He's one of the best on the outside. He's going to be their number 1 target, no question about that. But you got to keep on going down the line. You got to go to Daniel Jackson, 37 catches, 557, and 5 touchdowns. You talk about a guy stepping up in the absence of Chris Autman-Bell. Daniel Jackson was that guy last year where we really saw him improve big time, and he's going to be another really good threat on this offense. Now you go to the transfer portal to really boost up that wide receiver room, to really help out Athan Kaliakmanis. And these receivers and these weapons, I think, is a big reason why we could see a lot of improvement from number 8 at the quarterback position. You look at Corey Crooms and Elijah Spencer. Let's take a look first at Elijah Spencer, the transfer from Charlotte. 943 yards and 9 touchdowns last season in Conference USA. Looked great during the spring game. Athan, slant route after slant route after slant route. You can tell there's chemistry there. They've been working on that a lot. 9 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown in the spring game for Elijah Spencer. You take a look at Corey Crooms, put up big numbers the last 2 seasons at Western Michigan. Second team All-MAC in 2022, combined for over 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns the last 2 seasons. These are guys that have speed, that can get over the top. I'm really excited about the depth in this wide receiver room. Elijah Spencer and Corey Crooms, they're going to see a lot of action this season. How about Lemeke Brockington? He came on at the end of last season. Of course, everybody's going to look at that game-winning touchdown on that post route against Wisconsin. Expect him to really step up into the fold this season. Now, those are the wide receivers. They may have the best tight end in the Big Ten this year in Brevyn, Spann-Ford, big target, but he can move. 497 yards, 2 touchdowns receiving last season, all Big Ten honorable mention. A year ago, led Minnesota in receptions with 42 last year. He's extremely athletic for his size. Don't let him get ahead of steam. If he gets the football, you got to tackle him right away, because if he gets momentum down the field, he's going to put a shoulder into you, or if you go low, he's going to hurdle over you. He's got power. He's got athleticism. Brevyn, Spann-Ford will be a big-time target in this offense for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I'm really excited about what Minnesota has on the offensive side of the ball. I think the 2 big questions I have: how much can Athan Kaliakmanis develop? Can he be a playmaker? Can he make the play on 3rd and 9? Can he move the chains on a 3rd and 10? Yes, they've got talent on the perimeter. Yes, they've got talent at receiver. How is that going to go? You've had great offensive lines the last 2 years at Minnesota. Can this O-line get back to that level? Do they have to get back to that level? Or is this offense, instead of living between the tackles like they have been the last handful of seasons, is this going to be an offense that will live out on the perimeter a little bit more, that maybe capitalizes on a quick passing game, let the receivers make the play with their legs and have them get a lot of yards after catch situation? Can be very interesting to see how these new coordinators really mix things up this season on the offensive side of the ball. Now, you talk about offensive line, you talk about the run game. Those have been really big parts to Golden Gopher football over the last few years. Another really big part has been Joe Rossi and that defense. These defenses have been very good at Minnesota. Joe Rossi, absolutely one of the best defensive coordinators in the Big Ten, if not all of college football. This was a top 5 Big Ten defense in most major categories last season, and you're losing a decent amount of pieces, some bigger pieces on that Minnesota defense. Can they replace those pieces and still remain the top 5 in a lot of those Big Ten categories is a big-time question. First, you look at Mariano Sari-Maran, who they lose. Leading tackler from a year ago, 88 tackles. Also led the team in TFLs with 6.5 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. Jordan Howden in the secondary. All Big Ten honorable mention last season. 58 tackles, 2 interceptions. That's a big loss. And then you look at Flip Dixon and Braylon Oliver. Now, were they starters? No, but they were still key contributors for this team. And then you look at Trill Carter on the defensive line. So Trill Carter, Flip Dixon, and Braylon Oliver, all decent-sized losses in there. Carter is probably the biggest transfer loss on defense. He had 19 tackles and 2 for loss last season. At 6'2", 300 pounds, he was kind of clogging up the middle. He ended up transferring to Texas. Flip Dixon transferred to Rutgers. So these are losses that I think these guys, Trill Carter was already in that role, but I think you would have seen Flip Dixon and Braylon Oliver make their way into starting roles, so those are decent-sized losses. But I still believe Minnesota's going to have a solid defense. This is still a Joe Rossi defense with a decent amount of talent. It's going to be led in the linebacking core by Cody Lindenberg. 71 tackles, 4 loss last season. He's expected to be the top guy, kind of fill in where Marin really left off. Now, they've had to build their linebacking core a little bit via the transfer portal. Hey, look, another Western Michigan guy. Ryan Seelig comes in from Western Michigan, combined for 135 tackles, 12.5 TFLs, 5 sacks the last 2 seasons. This is an athletic guy that can do it all. I really watch him on film, and this guy's motor just keeps on going and just keeps on going, and he continuously finds the football. I love what he does. He can rush the passer. He can play the run. He can cover tight ends. He can do a lot of different things. I'm excited for what Ryan Seelig can do and the development he can have in a Joe Rossi defense. You talk about rushing the passer. How about Danny Strigow? A rush position. He can play 2-point stance at an outside linebacker. He can put his hand in the ground as a rushing type of thing. He led Minnesota in sacks last season with 3.5. Second on the team in TFLs with 4.5. At 6'5", 240 pounds, tough to block. This is a big kid, and he can get after the quarterback. He can get into the backfield. That is such a key part to having a good defense in today's day and age. Some other guys to take a look at. Let's talk about the defensive line. Kyler Baugh comes back after an all-Big Ten honorable mention season. 36 tackles. He's a leader on that defensive line. Defensive line now without Trill Carter, some other guys are going to have to step in and play a bigger role. Jalen Logan Renning started 12 games last season, 18 tackles, 3 for loss. Ja Joyner is another guy. He played in every game last season, 15 tackles and 2.5 for loss. This is a defensive line that's, I think, going to have to develop over time. I think there's strengths at the linebacker. I think there's strengths at the secondary, which I'll get into, but that defensive line is going to have to develop and get a little bit better. Secondary is very solid. It could be the strength of this team. They're going to be led by 2 guys, 2 veteran guys that have played some good amount of snaps in Golden Gopher uniforms. You look at Tyler Nubin and you look at Justin Wally, and then they've brought in some transfers, a decent amount of them, to try to support those guys in the secondary. How about Tyler Nubin? 55 tackles, 4 interceptions last season. He can definitely take the ball away. Here's my question. He's a good player. He's a very good player. Maybe one of the better safeties in the Big Ten. Can he replicate what Antoine Winfield Jr. did in 2019? 83 tackles, 7 interceptions in 2019. First team All-American, Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year. Those are big shoes to fill, but I would love to see Tyler Nubin possibly get to that level and fill in where Antoine Winfield Jr. really left off back there in 2019. How about Justin Wally at corner? 39 tackles, 3 interceptions. Wally and Nubin combined for 7 interceptions. These guys can take the football away. Started the final 6 games of his freshman season, and he's been a stalwart of this Minnesota defense ever since then. Really ever since he stepped foot on campus, Justin Wally has been a big-time contributor in this defense. I really like what he brings to the table at the corner position. He's going to be matched up on the opposing team's best receiver probably week in and week out. Now here come the transfers, because there's a good amount of them in the secondary, and a handful of these guys are going to be relied upon to step up big time and play a lot of snaps. Tyler Bride, Craig McDonald, Jack Henderson, Travion Jones, all expected to contribute. Let's start with Travion Jones, a grad transfer from Elon, 185 tackles, 11.5 TFLs, 9 pass breakups, 3 interceptions in 38 games. He was a 2019 FCS, I believe, a freshman All-American that season at Elon. So you got a guy kind of taking a step up a little bit as well. Same deal here with Jack Henderson. First team All-Southland Conference, FCS level, transfer from Southeast Louisiana. 163 tackles, 12 TFLs, 13 pass breakups, 6 interceptions in 33 games. He looked pretty good in the spring game. I thought he had some good reps in the spring game, and I think he could find his way into the starting lineup a lot of these games. Craig McDonald, transfer from Auburn by way of Iowa State. A couple of years back at Iowa State, 41 tackles and 2 interceptions. Only played in 2 games at Auburn. This was a local kid coming back from local Minnehaha Academy. And then, of course, you have Tyler Bride. 15 starts, nearly 1,200 snaps at Georgia Southern. 82 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and 16 pass breakups. Now, this is a Joe Rossi defense. This is a solid defense. Will it be a top 5 defense that it's been used to being? I don't know. I still think this is going to be, at the very worst, a middle-of-the-road Big Ten defense. It's going to get better. The more reps these guys get in this system, things are going to go better. I don't think it's going to be as good as it's been maybe the last few years, but it's still going to be a solid defense that will get better. When they get to November, Minnesota, I guarantee you, will be playing their best defensive football. Now, the big thing we mentioned at the top of the video, schedule. Schedule. That's all anybody's talking about when they talk about the Minnesota Golden Gophers these days. So let's look at that schedule for Minnesota. Of course, that first game is huge. You got to get off to a good start. You got to continue your dominance over Nebraska. I just want to say this. I love what Fox and the Big Ten has done with that Thursday night, Labor Day weekend kind of thing, putting the Big Ten kind of in its own window there on a Thursday night primetime game. Minnesota had it a few years back, I believe, when they played Ohio State at home to kick off the season. Of course, last year is Penn State and Purdue, so I like what's happening here. That's such a key game. You lose that one, you could lose to North Carolina, you could start 1-2. This could also be a team that could be undefeated going into the Michigan game. That North Carolina game we know is going to be tough. Drake May is outstanding. He's great. He's an awesome quarterback. The rest of their team, I don't know. Not a very good defense at North Carolina. We'll see if Minnesota can play bully ball and find a way to keep Drake May off the field. We know it's a tough schedule. Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State, the draw from the East Division. And then you get North Carolina out of conference. It's one of the toughest schedules in the country. But this is a Minnesota team that's very good. Now, being those facts, stating those facts, what you got from the East Division, you got North Carolina. They are going to have to do really well against the West. If they want to contend for a Big Ten West Division title, they want to try to get to Indianapolis in the final year of the Big Ten West. You need to find a way to beat Iowa. You need to find a way to beat the teams you should beat. And Michigan State is also going to be a game that they probably need to win if they want to get to Indianapolis and they want to win the Big Ten West Division. Look, Minnesota has the pieces in place to be a really good football team in 2023. This is a team that I think is going to get better and better over time as we get into the thick of it, as we get into late October and November. Minnesota is going to hit their stride. Can Athan Kaliakmanis develop? There's all kinds of weapons on the outside. Where is this defense going to be as this year goes on? A lot of people have been talking about the schedule. And because of that, well, maybe Minnesota goes 5-7, they go 6-6. They dip a little bit, but I think they've got the potential to keep that consistency rolling forward.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.